I'll try my absolute best to sort of to go through the most important parts of my work, and also, of course, try to contextualize it within the area or the sector, the construction sector. So allow me to share my slides, and then okay, right. So is that is it visible to all? Okay.
Yeah.
So yes, thank you very much. So I'll start by giving a very sort of brief introduction to my work. And then there are, like I said, there are certain aspects of the slides that it's probably a little bit too generic that I wouldn't spend too much time on, and I'll just skip those ones. And at the end of the presentation, if you have any question or any specific question related to some of the ones that I've skipped, please feel free, draw my attention to them. Okay. Does it work? Click. Yeah. Okay. So sort of my work is essentially looking across the different schools of thought in circular economy in general, and to see what sort of what I can draw from the different schools of thought to inform the work that I'm doing, which is towards creating strategies at different levels for the adoption and implementation of circular economy. So my work is around road mapping, essentially, sort of looking at what are some of the core principles of road mapping. Because, of course, road mapping is an existing discipline, within circular economy, and sustainability is actually now sort of borrowing some of these, some of the core principles from road mapping. So in general, road mapping is a strategic planning process of helping organizations to identify and prioritize pathways and also key actions to be tailored towards transitioning towards sort of a circular economic model. And it outlines steps. So it's a very, very regimented endeavor, which outlines steps and the actions needed in order to achieve circularity. And there are core principles. So there are three core principles. So a roadmap must have a focus area or a priority area, and also action plans that are tailored to those priority areas. And also there must be some practical implementation strategy. So these are the three main core areas of road mapping, derived from other sort of traditional road mapping processes. A bit of a background, road mapping within the realm of circular economy was actually pioneered. So I mean, there were other strategic work done before circular economy actually became a subject of interest. But then some of the early roadmaps, when I started my work, were actually pioneered by for example, by China. And then quickly, sort of between after 2013, we began to see an increase in adoption and sort of in the use of road mapping as a strategic tool towards the implementation of circular economy. We had the European Union, of course, the Action Plan of 2015, and then of course organizations such as Citra quickly sort of adopted some of these things and developed strategies and guidelines towards road mapping, and culminating in one of the very early roadmaps in Europe by Citra, that is a Finnish roadmap. And we've got the French government, the Netherlands, and other governments, and then quickly countries of the G7 sort of also began to adopt sort of some of these strategies sort of towards implementing circular economy. So a bit of a background with regards to my work. So my work, you can actually sort of view my work as two strands, essentially. So the first strand was a comprehensive analysis of about 700 roadmaps globally. Okay, so I collected about 700 different roadmaps. They're not necessarily, so you wouldn't necessarily see roadmaps in all of the titles. Some of them are strategies, some of them are action plans, some are sort of policy frameworks, and so on and so forth. But then they all have certain characteristics in common. So they identify focus areas, they have got some designated action plans, and then they've got some implementation strategies all in common. So collected 700 roadmaps and identified certain patterns that sort of or define the characteristics of these roadmaps. And then I also looked into other theories, so theoretical frameworks, existing theoretical frameworks. That's why these two are in red. So I'll explain those ones later. And then I, of course, used some benchmarking, so sort of benchmarking some of the best practices of road mapping. And all of these sort of came together to help me establish sort of this, what I call the standardized framework for the development of roadmaps. So that is the first half of my work. The second half of my work was to revisit some of these roadmaps, and this time sort of being a little bit more specific. So I see the 700 down now, reducing it down to about 380, around 400 roadmaps that are more specific to different levels, to national roadmaps, to municipal roadmaps, to regional sectoral roadmaps, as well as some of we call the baseline roadmaps. So this collection of roadmaps were actually used sort of different methodologies, including data science methodologies, such as natural language processing, topic modeling, and so on and so forth, to distill some key parameters from these roadmaps in order to develop a dashboard, which I will share with you shortly, which essentially depicts some of the attributes of all the global efforts being sort of towards adopting circular economy in different areas, different sectors. Okay, so I talked about some of the theories and standards. So the framework that I built, which we're going to talk about shortly, are underpinned by these theories. Okay, so we've got, like I said, we've got the traditional road mapping sort of theory, which we know has been in existence, being used in technology road mapping, pioneered by the likes of Robert Fowle. So this is actually one of the main underpinning theories for the framework that I have developed. And then we've got, of course, theories of strategic management, okay, of course, focusing on organizational objectives and external environment. Of course, certain processes such that we're all familiar with, like SWOT analysis, stakeholder engagement, and also using KPIs or sort of defining KPIs. Sustainability science, of course, the circular economy ISO, the standards, the main standards for circular economy sort of implementation, and also governance. ISO was also one of the underpinning standards that I used for the framework, and then of course benchmarking theories, as well as sort of balanced scorecard theories. So the framework, in a nutshell, has got two parts. So the first part is to establish what I refer to as the typological framework. Now, this framework has now been developed into a paper which is currently undergoing the second stages of peer review, and hopefully, the publication will be out soon. So the typological framework essentially is a hierarchical model that classifies circular economy road mapping into three major levels. So there's the national level sitting at the top, we've got the regional or municipal level, and then we've got the baseline level, which is applied to materials, resources, and sectors. Okay, and then there are some typical enabling processes that are, I mean, these are not exhaustive, and they're not, they sort of, we can't just confine them to each of those levels. Sometimes there are some overlaps between them, but then these are the main typical processes that I have identified that are peculiar to these different levels of road mapping. Again, this is a very, very messy sort of table. I don't expect to go through all of that, but then essentially this gives us sort of some of the key definitions of different elements with regards to the different types of roadmaps. So we've got the boundaries, we've got the different characteristics, and where they are positioned on the hierarchy, and some of the known priority areas as far as the roadmaps that I've looked at, and then the purposes, the examples, key stakeholders, goals and metrics, implementation tools, and then some of the policy instruments. So In the second stage of my work, which is the dashboard development, I've got a screenshot of one of the dashboards. So I'll take you through the dashboard next to identify some of the countries that have developed these roadmaps at different levels to give you a regional perspective. So I looked into 121 different countries that have developed roadmaps at different levels and 144 cities. And of all these roadmaps, I've been able to identify 57 major priority areas that these countries have focused on. And then in all, I collected about 398 roadmaps to inform the development of the dashboard. So I'm logged onto another screen. I'm going to quickly take you through the dashboard, and then I'll go back to the remaining slides. So just bear with me a second. Dashboard. Okay, so this is the dashboard. I called it Circular Economy Roadmap Metrics. It's not really metrics, but I struggle a bit with sort of the general title to give to the roadmap. So it's made up of 7 different plots, and each plot sort of visualizes certain attributes of the different global circular economy roadmaps that I've collected. And there are other additional indicator data sets that I collected from other sort of reliable sources to conflate the road mapping attributes that I've collected. So I think what we're interested here is this first plot, which essentially visualizes all the regional efforts. So there are about 398 roadmaps altogether, showing us the distribution, so regionally. So this is using longitude and latitude data, essentially to place each country geographically. Now, so these are the number of roadmaps, but then this doesn't show us the actual quantity of roadmaps. If we go here and select the roadmap counts, that the sizes of these dots would now change into bubbles, which would give us an indication of the different or the number of roadmaps each of these countries have developed. So we can see in Europe is actually leading in the number of roadmaps. So these are all sorts of roadmaps at different levels, not just sectoral roadmaps, but the national, municipal, as well as some baseline roadmaps. And then we see the rest of the world sort of, dotted about it a bit. There are other variables down here. If we have time at the end of the presentation, I might take you through some of the variables that I extracted from all the roadmaps that I have analyzed. Okay, so I'm going to change this. Go back. Okay. Again, looking at the different roadmaps, these are some very, very sort of high-level statistics with regards to some of the key priority sectors by typology. So like I said before, I identified sort of these sort of 4 major typology or types of roadmaps. So we've got the national, the regional, the municipal. So, but then regional and municipal sort of share similar characteristics. So in the hierarchy, I place them under one. But here, I separated them for the in terms of the dominant priority sectors or priority areas within each of the roadmaps. Now, I intentionally highlighted construction to essentially to underscore where they sit under the different types of roadmaps. So with national roadmaps, you can see these are the different priority areas per all the national roadmaps globally. Municipal regional roadmaps, construction doesn't actually score that highly on that. Municipal roadmaps, you can see where construction is. So essentially construction scores quite highly in most of the roadmaps. In all the sectoral roadmaps that I've collected, construction by far is the most prominent priority area in all the sectoral roadmaps that I've collected. Again, some statistics down here. We've got, so with built environment as a priority area, Africa leads, followed by Europe. So this sort of a bit of a regional perspective. Construction and demolition, I intentionally separated that from construction sector because there are certain nuances between the two. So where a country declares construction and demolition waste as a priority area versus where a country declares just construction as a priority area. Okay, so we can see Europe again is leading in most of the categories here. Okay, again, looking at the timeline of the different types of roadmaps. So like I said, some of the early roadmaps were developed in 2013, and then I collected data up until 2022. We can see that there's a sort of an exponential increase in the development of roadmaps, with sectoral roadmap sort of gaining momentum as we can see here. So that is the one to watch, because construction roadmap sits within sectoral types of roadmaps.
I'm so sorry to interrupt. My screen is only showing the opening slide again. I went through, but...
Oh, is it the same with everybody?
No, I've just responded to you there, Jane, because I could see the presentation okay on my screen.
Yeah, if at any point you switched between slides yourselves, then you need to click synchronize with the presenter to go to the actual slide.
Okay. Thank you. I apologize for interrupting.
No, sorry. I apologize for this as well. I'm hoping that the problem is resolved. Thank you, Jane. Okay. So if I may continue. So now focusing on construction as a priority area. Again, we've got some statistics from all the different roadmaps that I've collected. Again, because there is a bit of a synergy, a relationship between construction as a sector or as a priority area, built environment, and also construction and demolition waste. I collected all the different national sort of distribution of roadmaps globally, and sort of and visualize them here. So we can see that as far as built environment, I mean, Europe leads in pretty much every area, as you can see. Okay, Europe leads in every area. So the top three sort of charts essentially show the regional distribution of these three areas as priority areas, or as a matter of priority within the roadmaps that they've developed. And we can see Europe, as far as built environment is as a national priority, Europe is leading. And then Africa is the next one. This is the one that I covered in the previous slide. Construction and demolition as a national priority, again, Europe overwhelmingly. This sort of features overwhelmingly in European roadmaps compared with the rest of the regions in the world. Construction sector as national priority, again, 63% of all roadmaps, or 63% of all of these, this as a national priority actually sort of dwells within the European roadmaps compared with the rest of the world. Again, with regards to the types of roadmaps, so this being a priority area in the different types of roadmaps, national roadmaps have got this, followed by municipal roadmaps for construction. For built environments, actually split between the two, and then for construction and demolition waste, again, it's split between the two, but the national roadmaps overwhelmingly has this as a priority. Again, looking at different policies, what are the sort of the regional leaders. Again, looking at Europe, Europe has developed more roadmaps than the rest of the world. And then CE policies, again, Europe is leading. But then there's another interesting sort of twist here when it comes to waste management or waste management policy. South America, Africa seem to lead the world. Again, not sure exactly why this, but there's a lot more insight from this, which is actually finding its way into one of the papers that I'm writing to sort of to try and understand the reason behind this. Looking at roadmaps by priority sizes, again, Europe leads the rest of the world. So this is not just construction, this is all the different priority areas put together. Regional leaders by priority types. And then these are the different policies. So I'm not going to go through all of these things because I'm going to share the slides afterwards, because there are some more construction specific slides that I'm going to cover later. So I'm going to just go through some of these statistics. Again, this is a very interesting one. So this is just a focus on UK. So these are all the different, so I just use a heat map to visualize the key priority areas within the UK. So all the different roadmaps that I've collected for the UK. So these are the dominant priority areas within the UK, but we can see built environment here as a circular. So CERM here is a circular economy roadmap. So these are the different, what I call the strategy documents that I've collected that share similar characteristics with roadmaps. And we can see here, sustainable waste management, of course, is the dominant across all the different sectors, different levels. But then we've got construction and demolition here as a policy brief. Then we've got as a roadmap, we've got the construction sector, and it's got the highest count in the as far as the priority areas in the UK are concerned. And we've got the built environment over here. Okay, again, we're going to go through this, not relevant. And now to the second, the other half of my research, which is the development of the framework. So the framework that I've developed, which is being used by different policymakers and different levels to as a guide, essentially, to develop their roadmaps. And as I said before, the framework's actually informed, or it's underpinned by those 7 theories that I looked into. So these are academic theories, and there's quite a lot of academic rigor where I try to associate every phase with a theoretical sort of a theoretical underpinning, essentially. So there's phase 1, which during which the driver of the roadmap needs to be established. So I call that the driver layer. And then there's the action layer, and then there's the measurement layer. I would explain this further. And then we've got phase 2, which is the baseline and assessment phase. Phase 3 is the strategy development phase. And then phase 4 is where you actually develop the roadmap and implement the roadmap and then monitor the roadmap. So this is quite an iterative phase where you go back and forth steps to do design, you communicate, you execute, you monitor, and then go through the same process over and over again. So this slide sort of goes slightly more in more detail with regards to the foundation. So the scoping and goal setting. So the driver layer is split into setting the goal or the motivation behind the roadmap, and these are some of the most common sort of aggregated motivations or goals. And then these are also stakeholder or audience driven. Now we've got the level, so you need to define the different levels that the roadmap is going to cover. And then what is the input to the roadmap, which is often typology driven. So is it data driven? Is it data led? Process? Most roadmaps are actually stakeholder and expert knowledge driven. We go through this. And then we've got here, so I mentioned earlier on that there are 3 areas that most roadmaps have in common. So we're called the FAT principles: the focus area, action plan, and then practical implementation strategy. So that's what I call the action layer. So this is essentially before any roadmap work begins, it's recommended that this sort of this template is essentially adhered to. And then the measurement layer, determining how we're going to measure. So defining some metrics and having some long-term KPIs, and then forming some impact analysis and impact assessment, and also sort of understanding where policy sits, how much of this informs policy and vice versa. So I looked into the CLC's construction roadmap, which is essentially, so just to answer your question, Ramya, this is probably one of the most influential construction sector roadmaps that I've come across. It's not too detailed, it's quite high level, but it actually touches pretty much every aspect of the framework that I've developed, and it actually has actually informed the development of the framework as a benchmark. So starting with that, I looked into the sort of how do we essentially place some of the different aspects of the roadmap within the first stage of the framework. So we'll call the parameter settings. So we look at the goals. So the goal essentially achieving zero avoidable waste, and understanding the generation and true cost of waste. So it's part of the goal. So this, we could say it's an environmental sort of motivation behind. We can give that overarching motivation or goal. And then the roadmap level is quite high level, which is essentially waste in construction and demolition. It's really, really high level. So it would say this is a macro kind of type of roadmap. And then what is the data source of the fuel? So we looked at it as a stakeholder and expert-led. It's also data-driven because there's a lot of dependence on sort of like environmental data, DEFRA provided data, sort of Green Construction Board sort of data, Eurostat as well. And then there's also a lot of process involved. The action layer looks into again the FAP principle that I talked about earlier on. So essentially it's all about construction and demolition waste. The focus areas are the waste reporting and standardization, true waste cost and development of waste KPIs by 2024, and then some very, very key actions as listed. And then with the measurement, of course, there are certain metrics in there. So tracking waste volume, recovery, and environmental impact. There are several other metrics, but I can't fit all of these in, all the metrics in here. And then also in their roadmap, they've got some very, very clear KPIs. So there is a distinction between metrics which are related to the focus or the priority areas, and they've also got some long-term KPIs such as benchmarks for waste reduction over time, and some economic implications. They've done some impact analysis and impact assessment, which is essentially to do with the triple bottom line, and then of course the overarching policy influence to use board recommendations to influence future policies. So this is the first phase run through the framework. The second phase essentially is what we call the baseline assessment. So there is a SWOT analysis, established organizations, data sources such as DEFRA, Environment Agency, and the rest of it. So that's the strength of it. There are weaknesses, which were highlighted as some of the gaps and inconsistencies in reporting standards across different project sizes. And then of course, there were some opportunities that which the development of standardized reporting by 2022 and 2030 for different project sizes and so on and so forth. And of course, some of the threats identified were some of the legacy systems and some of the metrics, outdated metrics, resistant, and some of the resistance to change that is quite inherent within the industry. They did some gap analysis as well, again, which I'm not going to go through all of that. They've got the data layer again, so they've identified key data sources which have been through. They benchmarked some, they highlighted strategic understanding of material flows in their roadmap, and also the projects such as the true cost of waste was again benchmarked as the LCA. And also there's the stakeholder layer, which essentially which used to map stakeholders from within the construction firms, waste management firms, and then also government. There are some secondary stakeholders which included data providers, software providers, and then they've got some tertiary stakeholders as well. And then with the assessment layer, these are some of the items that are identified from that roadmap. I'm conscious of time, so I'm really, really racing through this. Again, the third phase, as per that roadmap, again, looked at the strategy development. So they've got the visioning layer, the time setting layer. So that was very, very clearly delineated. And then there's also the governance, which is all within the visioning layer. So of course, they've got multiple governing bodies and organizations, such as the CLC, of course, which is there's DEFRA, and then there's Environment Agency. The refinement layer, where they went and refined some of the focus or priority areas that were identified at the beginning in the goal setting stage. Consistent waste reporting, development of KPIs, and true waste cost measurement. There's the engagement layer, which essentially defined the ways, the rules of engaging with existing stakeholders. Collaboration, again, the engagement with software providers, and then collaboration with the research community for data sharing and development of resource use and sort of building of different models. And then, of course, the collaboration layer, which is slightly different from the engagement layer, which involved multiple stakeholders outside from within the firms and also outside the firms, and then the potential pilots for new tools, KPIs, and waste management strategies. And then finally, the fourth phase involved the implementation and monitoring of the different actions, of course, starting with the priority areas and then different actions that have been assigned to those different focus areas, and then sort of put in those different layers within the framework, to produce this result. And again, due to time constraints, I'm not going to go through all of it, but then this will be shared at the end of this presentation. So I think that's everything, and I'm hoping that I've covered most of it, but then I would leave time for Q&A if there are any. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Halid, for that insightful presentation. Yeah, the floor's open for any questions. Please feel free to pop it in the chat. Or if anyone wants to have a go and say their question out loud, that's fine too. I'll start. So Halid, I think most of the roadmaps that you showed today were more at sort of national, country, regional space, like place level. What about roadmaps from the private sector or industry? Did you come across those for the construction sector, minerals, and how did they compare in terms of the quality of the roadmaps?
That's a good question. Thank you very much. I don't know if it was clear in some of the statistics that I shared. The private sector is one of the most unrepresented sectors in the development of circular economy roadmaps and strategies. I'm not saying that they're not active, but there's nothing out there. So they might have developed many sort of technical roadmaps which are not out there in the public domain. So in this search, all the roadmaps that I accessed are roadmaps and strategies that are in the public domain. So there is a very pronounced sort of absence, essentially, of private sector representation. With regards to sectors, because of the lack of representation of different sectors, so the data, so the sectoral types of roadmaps are very, very few. I think it's only a fraction of all the different roadmaps that I have collected. So the priority areas that are the 57 priority areas that I highlighted are actually extracted from, say, for example, national roadmaps. So majority of the priority areas. So these would be like national or municipal roadmaps mentioning construction and demolition waste and built environment as their key priorities, as opposed to finding these priorities from existing roadmaps developed by the construction sector. So there are one of few. So the CLC roadmap, for example, is one of the very, very few construction specific or construction sector specific roadmap that I have come across. Roadmaps have been developed for waste management, specifically for waste management. Roadmaps have been developed for plastics. There are quite a lot of, probably when it comes to sectors, I think plastics has the most. There are construction specific roadmaps, but very, very, very few and far between. So I'm hoping this has answered your question, Rania.
Thank you. Any more questions from anyone who's joined?
Hi.
Yeah. Hello.
Yes, hi. Thanks for the presentation. So I've been reviewing some roadmaps on cement and concrete, and I usually get the feeling that even though they set some target percentage, these percentage are usually difficult to trace. So the assumptions they make to get to this percentage are usually not in the roadmaps. And I wanted to see what you found in other roadmaps, or if that's a tendency in all the roadmaps. Just your opinion on the traceability of the proposals made.
Yeah, so there are, I mean, like I said, I've got the data and the insights essentially from pretty much all of the roadmaps that I've looked into, the sectors and the different levels. What I don't have is the specific technical sort of contents of these roadmaps as part of this exercise. The data is there, it's been extracted. So what I'm doing is I'm producing, for example, I'm producing different outputs and different papers for every sector. So at the moment, I haven't got the detailed sort of insights from every single roadmap that would sort of essentially answer this question, that would give us that sort of that really, really clear, the granular insight about the construction sector or about a different sector. So as you saw from this presentation, is more about some of the, if you like, the general strategy that that I'm essentially proposing by looking at these different roadmaps. So it's about how do we strategize towards sector economy? How do we help with the strategy for any given industry? Nothing to do with a specific sector, but this data is there. The data, the insights that you're asking for is actually there from the collection of different roadmaps, but I don't have it readily available at the moment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And the availability of the dashboard, is that going to be public access, or how will that work?
Yeah, the dashboard is actually it has been public, but then my team are sort of it's going to be on the CE Hub knowledge website. But what we're doing now is we're trying to make it meaningful, more meaningful to audience. So we are first of all, we're including a documentation to explain what each of those variables covered sort of mean, again, to which also trying to, because there are some, very, very essentially strong insights to be derived from it, but we want to make it meaningful so that when users interact with the website, they would understand, okay, so when I combine this variable with that variable and I get this result, this is actually what it means. And this is where the different data comes, because the several hundreds of data sources, both the road mapping data sources and the indicator data sources. So we're currently in the final phases, final stages of defining some of these variables, so that when users interact with this website, they would have a really good understanding. Yeah, so that's what but it should be out hopefully within a matter of weeks.
Thank you. Go ahead, Jane. Sorry, I jumped the gun and didn't put my hand up there and asked a question before you had a chance. Go ahead.
Right. Thank you very much for the presentation. I found it fascinating. And it's really good to see the analysis, and you're well done for going through 700 roadmaps or whatever, and pulling out these criteria. I think will be very helpful for people in different countries, etc. I am one of the authors of the Zero Avoidable Waste Route Mapping Construction for the UK. So thank you very much for your kind words. I think when we did it, we weren't knowledgeably doing what you said we did, but we're all quite logical. So we went in a sort of correct way. I think, and this is what my question is really, it's this distinction between what's government and what's private sector, etc. And I think it's often not as clear cut as everyone seems to think. That Zero Avoidable Waste route map actually was a voluntary activity of keen people within the sector, and I can see Graham Winter from the Environment Agency just along the thing. So that, in terms of the driver, it was, if you like, people wanting to save the planet. The engagement with government wasn't as great as we had hoped. We're very pleased to see in DEFRA's DEFRA is the UK agency for environment, that they're seeing the zero avoidable waste route map as a way to engage and go forward. And in fact, I spoke with them this morning, and they are giving a presentation tomorrow morning to the Construction Leadership Council. So we're hoping to be able to engage. I think that in terms of measurement and monitoring, it often, and particularly in material flows, it does have to be at the government level. There's no way individual companies can do it. But to get to my question, a lot of information on all of this lies within trade associations and on trade association websites. And I am aware from earlier dialogue with the UCL team that quite often that sort of information isn't available on the search engines of academia. And therefore, a lot of what you would call grey literature is missed. And I wondered how you were sort of dealing with that, because you know, I can think of quite a lot of sectors in the UK who over the last 15, 20 years have got all sorts of resource efficiency action plans, circular economy, this, that and the other. But I know that academics often don't know it exists. And I'd like to try and bridge that gap between industry and academia.
Yeah. So in terms of the search, I actually intentionally steered sort of clear of sort of academic. So these are not informed by academic literature.
Okay.
So everything that I collect, these are roadmaps. But then I also had a criteria. I had a sort of like a selection, inclusion and exclusion criteria, where the roadmaps that I looked for had to meet certain standards before I included them. They needed to have an agent. So I have a collection of agencies. So it's really interesting what you said at the beginning of your remark with regards to the sort of the difference between the government and the sort of like the authors of some of these roadmaps. So I went through quite a sort of a painstaking process to actually define the authors of these roadmaps. So I've got a collection of different authors. So yes, I would to say, I mean, yeah, it's difficult to say whether this is private sector or public sector. But then I did not give them that kind of definition. I gave them definitions such as, so, okay, so this is authored by the government. This is authored by local authority. This is authored by a national think tank or by a global agency. So they seem to be the dominant authors of all the roadmaps that I've looked at. And in terms of the availability of some of the road, because again, this is just a sample. I'm sure there are probably same number of, or even twice the number of roadmaps that I've looked into that are not out there in the public domain. But then I thought that, okay, so if this is what is out there, it is just a sort of probably a fair representation of what the picture looks like. So yeah, so to answer your question, I just did a general search, and I also used quite a lot of artificial intelligence using certain keywords and sort of, you know, things that I got from sort of topic modeling of existing roadmaps to actually search for similar roadmaps which tick some of those boxes out there. And yeah, so I just really drew the line when I got 700. Out of 700, I didn't use all of them for the dashboard. I only use about half of that for the dashboard. Yeah, so but then so through the analysis, it became very clear that although there are lots of agencies involved, like for example, Ellen MacArthur Foundation and all of that, so I gave them sort of different definitions of, you know, local agencies, government agencies, but then there's nothing at all to say this is from the private sector, essentially. Because I expect some of the more technical roadmaps. There are one or two technical roadmaps from the private sector, but a lot of these things are quite proprietary, and they wouldn't just make them, you know, they wouldn't put them out there in the public domain. yeah, so I got most of the roadmaps through AI sort of led search, you know, on the internet essentially.
Okay, I think we are at the end of our time for the webinar. Thank you so much for joining, everyone. If you have any further questions, please feel free to email the center email address or get in touch with Halid directly. So once again, thank you for joining and have a very good rest of the day. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.